Hello, and welcome to this month's full moon yoga class. We've been doing this now for I think about 25 years almost. It is a free class. However, if you'd like to donate, your donations are always gratefully accepted. To donate or to watch other videos which I've been collecting online, you can visit my website at yogateacher.com and then click on the link for video. This is a class for experienced beginners or intermediate or advanced students. A little prior experience is helpful. There won't be as much instruction, and also you aren't going to be able to see the yoga practice, so you'll need to follow along by verbal cues. I'll be live streaming sunset and the full moon rise while we're practicing our yoga. Because you won't be able to see, listen carefully. And if you aren't sure, just make up whatever feels right to you, what makes sense to you. Feel free to hold poses a little longer or come out sooner, or to do more advanced or easier versions. Feel free to adjust any way you can that makes sense to you. Okay. I'm looking forward to tonight's practice and look forward to staying online afterwards. Be happy to answer any questions and visit with anyone that has questions. Thank you so much for joining me. And now, I'll give you a minute or two to get set up, and then we'll begin. Find a comfortable seated position on your sticky mat. Sitting cross-legged or kneeling, whatever feels more comfortable to you. Find a comfortable seated position, cross-legged, sitting on your mat. Bring your hands together over the heart. Namaste. I'm so glad that you could join us for this yoga class. We'll begin by paying attention to our breath. Close your eyes without squeezing or tensing. Imagine the eyelid growing heavy and settling without clenching. Or imagine a snowflake falling to earth and resting lightly on the ground. Soften the space behind the eyelids, behind the eyeballs, the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. And now that you're paying attention, notice how you're feeling physically, and take a moment to reposition. Draw the flesh out from under the sit bones, reach the sit bones back, tilt the pelvis forward slightly, and then lengthen the spine, not starting with the head, but instead focus on the pelvis and lift the waist out of the pelvis. And then keeping that extension, float the chest up off the waist, and then float the collarbones off the chest, and then allow the head to float off of the collarbones. Try to hold the most expansive, aligned, seated position that you can hold without tensing. We want a sense of floating. Then turn your attention to the breath. Allow the breath to be fluid, smooth, slow, and steady. If you are already familiar with the Ujjayi breath, you can add a very light vocalization. It'll sound almost like someone sleeping when you can hear their breath in the back of the throat. Listening to the sound of your own breath, and let that sound draw your attention deeper into yourself. As you continue breathing, come back to the face, relaxing the forehead, the eyebrows, the eyelids, the eyeballs. Draw the eyeballs back into the brain. Release the jaw. Notice if your teeth are touching, and let the bottom jaw hang slack-jawed. Release the tip of the tongue, the belly of the tongue, the root of the tongue, all the way down the throat. And now very delicately, very gently begin to move your head, not trying to stretch anything. Instead, exploring your range of free movement. Exploring how far can you move your head without any resistance. And then expanding that movement just enough to create subtle sensations, more subtle, more delicate than a stretch. As your head moves towards the left side, your right shoulder becomes increasingly important. So explore ever so gently lifting or sinking or drawing the shoulder forward or rolling the shoulder back. Again, very subtle, gentle movements to create delicate sensations. As you're doing this, keep coming back to the face and relaxing the jaws, the lips, the tongue. Keep coming back to the breath. Stretching the exhale. Occasionally switch sides. As your head moves to the right, the left shoulder becomes more important. So begin to explore adjusting from the left shoulder blade in conjunction with the movements of the head and the neck. Your goal is to create delicate, pleasant sensations in the neck while you focus on relaxing and while you focus on your breath. Allow the head to grow heavier and heavier as if you were almost hypnotizing yourself. Take a few more breaths, listening to the sound of the breath as it moves through the throat. Fluid, smooth, wave-like breathing. And then coming back to center. Take a moment to reestablish your posture, repositioning the pelvis if you need to, floating up from the waist, through the sternum, through the collarbones, through the crown of your head, broaden through the shoulder girdle, and then let go of all and any effort to maintain your posture and float into an expansive seated position. As we get ready for our first twist, before you start any movement, focus on the shoulder blade. Focus on your right shoulder blade and see if you can draw the shoulder blade into the spine and begin to draw it down the back slightly and begin to lift the chest slightly. And then as you start to rotate, let that right shoulder blade draw you into the rotation. Reaching around behind you with the fingertips and touching the ground with your fingertips, and then using that just to brace gently. Cross the left hand over the right knee, and then using both hands to increase the rotation slightly However, we want to emphasize extension and expansion over rotation. So don't rotate so far that you begin to collapse and constrict. If that's happening, back off slightly, re-establish the length and the expansiveness of your position, and then without losing that, see if you can rotate in a little deeper. Then focus on a complete breath. Breathe into the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the back, and the collarbones. And then on the exhale, if it feels good, turn a little deeper. One more complete breath. And then carefully releasing and coming back to center. Try and connect with your left shoulder blade and start the twist by drawing the left shoulder blade into the spine and down the back as you begin to lift the chest up, and then allowing the left shoulder blade to draw you into your twist as you rotate to the left. Take your fingertips to the ground. Cross the right hand over the left knee. Lift, expand, and rotate. Then turn your attention to breathing with a deep, complete yogic breath. Breathing into the belly, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones. Couple more breaths. And coming back to center. Placing your hands on your knees and then rotating with your abdominal core. Bring the belly forward, lift the chest, roll the shoulders back, look up slightly, and breathe in. On the exhale, take the middle of the ribs to the right and then back. And as you do that, let the shoulders broaden and the chest hollow. Then continue taking your ribs to the opposite side and then forward and up, lifting the chest, rolling the shoulder blades back and down as you breathe in. And then going to the first side and rounding back as you breathe out. One more time, big circle. With practice, you want to minimize the movement of the head while maximizing the movement of the rib cage. Reverse directions. As the chest comes forward and lifts, you finish breathing in. And as you drop the small of your back into the backmost position and you broaden the upper back, you finish exhaling. Circling one more time. And coming back to center. Opening into a side stretch. Take your right fingertips and touch them to the floor about a foot from your right hip. And then you can either walk them in a little closer or walk them away a little further as needed. Lift through the waist, through the sternum, through the collarbones, lengthen through both sides of the torso. Then lift and float the left arm overhead. Draw the inner armpit back and chest forward. Even better, think about drawing the shoulder blade back as the chest moves forward. Flare the left rib cage without collapsing through the right side. If you already have a stretching sensation through the left rib cage, just hold where you are or ease up slightly. And if you can't find the stretch yet, walk the right hand away a little bit. Press through the right hand to anchor the left sit bone. Flare the ribs and breathe into the pose. Take another breath or two. And then coming back to center. Take your left fingertips to the ground, walk them away a little bit, and then lift through the waist, through the ribs, through the chest, through the collarbones. Float the right arm overhead. Draw the right shoulder blade or the right inner armpit back and the chest forward and up. Flare the right rib cage. And if that's not enough, walk your left hand away a little bit. If you lean over too far, you'll start to collapse through the lower rib cage, and we want to prevent that from happening. So if you're collapsing, come closer to vertical and reestablish the extension through both sides of the torso. Breathe into this position, 3 or 4 more deep, complete breaths. And coming back to center. Coming on to your hands and knees for table. Knees hip width apart, hands under the shoulders. And then begin practicing cat-cow. On your next inhale, begin lifting the tailbone, sink the belly, open the chest, and look up as you finish breathing in. On the exhale, tuck the tailbone, round the low back, mid back, upper back like a Halloween cat, and then tuck the chin as you finish exhaling. Moving on your own with your breath, breathe slow and deep, and let the movement follow the breath. Two or 3 more repetitions. And coming back to table. Tuck your toes under, walk your hands in close to your knees, and then begin to lift the knees off the ground and walk your hands in towards your feet until you're in a standing forward bend, but keep the knees bent and soft. To create a stretch in the hamstrings without straightening the knees, focus on rotating the pelvis. Keeping your knees bent slightly, lift the tailbone, sink the belly, rotate from the hip sockets. And as you rotate the pelvis, the sit bones will lift away from the knee, and that'll create a stretch in the hamstrings. By keeping the knees bent slightly, we keep the stretch in the belly of the muscle, and we keep the stretch out of the area behind the knee, which is important. If you still feel a little stretching sensation behind the knee, bend the knees even more, and then rotate the pelvis more strongly. If your low back is feeling awkward or fatigued, use your hands to carry some of your weight on your thighs. Bend the left knee a little more and shift the stretch to the right leg. Then bend the right knee a little more and move the stretch to the left leg. Go side to side. Balance the stretch evenly between both legs. Take another breath or 2. And then as you start to roll up to a standing position, you can use your hands to carry some of your weight, or you can roll up like a rag doll. But remember, as your wrist passes the kneecaps, start bending the knees and keep bending the knees until you're almost upright. And then straighten the legs. Bring your hands to prayer position. And then release your arms down to your sides. Take a few moments now to pendiculate. Pendiculating is the way a small child that's never had a yoga class might stretch. Or for those of you that have cats or dogs at home, when they wake up from a nap and they stretch, that's called a pendiculation. Close your eyes and without thinking. Cats don't think their way into a stretch, they feel their way. So without thinking, focus on feeling. And try and remember what it was like when you were a kid stretching in bed without thinking about how you were doing it. You get the urge to yawn, to stretch. Roll the shoulders out. Focus on what feels good, moving from instinct rather than intellect. If you can yawn a few times, even better. Yawning releases nitric oxide, which opens up the capillary beds and helps to bring fluid into the fascia so that we hydrate the fascia before we begin working in a pose. When you're ready, come back to center. Come to the very front of your mat for a full 12-step sun salutation. If any of these transitions or movements are awkward, feel free to cheat or adjust any way that makes sense to you. Standing at the very front of your mat, bringing your palms together over the heart in prayer position. On your next exhalation, release the arms down to your sides, float out and up overhead as you breathe in. And then a swan dive as you breathe out, reaching the hips back as you release into a forward bend. Bend the knees enough that you can touch the floor comfortably. Fingers either side of your big toes. Now take your right leg and reach it back into a big lunge. And then open the chest, roll the shoulders back and breathe in. Hold your breath as you step the left leg back into plank. And on the exhale, press down with control to the floor. And on the inhale, draw through into cobra, rolling the shoulders back, reaching the chest forward, pressing the tops of the feet into the floor. Take a breath or two in cobra. Feel free to adjust, to explore, to feel your way around within the pose. And then when you're ready, transitioning into downward facing dog. Tuck the toes under, point the tailbone up, lift the knees, reach the hips back and up, draw the chest through towards your feet. Your first downward dog of the day, play with it a little bit. Walk the dog, bend one knee, reach the opposite heel down, go side to side, bending and straightening the legs, or rolling the shoulders, or rolling the hips. And then settle into the pose a little more deeply and take 2 or 3 more breaths, reaching away through the sit bones, drawing the chest through towards your feet, floating the shoulder blades away from your feet. Any transition is fine. As we come into our lunge, if you struggle with that transition, start off by coming down with your left knee to the floor. Lift the right hand, roll the right hip up, and then step the right foot all the way up to the front of the mat. And place both hands back on the floor and lunge. Open the heart, breathe in. Step the left foot up and exhale into your forward bend. Roll up, letting the knees buckle, or hinging up if you prefer. Floating the arms overhead on the inhale. Coming back to prayer, we'll do one more round. On your next exhale, release the arms to your sides, float out and up overhead as you breathe in. Swan dive as you breathe out. Bend the knees enough that you can reach the floor, even with the big toes, and then float the left leg back into a deep lunge. Breathe in. Hold the breath momentarily as you step back into plank. And on the exhale, begin pressing down. And then draw through into cobra. Press the tops of the feet into the floor so the knees lift slightly. Reach the chest forward, roll the shoulder blades back and down. Organize the pose so it feels right. Take a breath or two, feeling the muscles in the back of the body working, but in a way that feels healthy, that feels pleasurable. Downward facing dog when you're ready. Lift the tailbone. Reach the sit bones away. Draw the chest through. If you know how to spiral the legs, you can add leg spirals. If you know how to spiral the arms and shoulders, you can introduce that. If not, don't worry about it. Focus on breathing. Couple more breaths. Any transition into the lunge is fine, but again, if you struggle, start off by setting your right knee on the floor, lift the left hand, roll the left hip up a little bit, step the left foot all the way up to the front of your mat, and then bring both hands to the floor, roll the chest up and open, roll the shoulders back and down, breathe in, step the right foot up to the front of your mat, forward bend as you breathe out. Roll up, buckling the knees or hinging up, and right into an overhead stretch as you finish breathing in, and then back to prayer position. Take a breath or two just to notice how you feel. Next, we'll be practicing a few standing poses, starting with Trikonasana, triangle pose. Turning sideways on your mat and stepping your feet apart. And we want a nice wide stance, but the way to measure how wide is by the mobility of the hips. If you walk your feet too wide, your hips won't move freely from side to side. So, start with a wide base and then shift your hips left and right. If they move freely, walk your feet a little wider and continue until the hips begin to feel just a little bit constricted. They still move, but it's a little bit more difficult. And when you reach that point, walk your feet back in a few inches so the hips are free, but you do have a wide stance. The reason for this is that we use our hips in this pose to control the pose, and if your hips are frozen and locked by the positioning, then you can't control the pose anymore. Now, turn your right foot out at 90 degrees, and then lift the left heel, take it wider, set it down. A line from the big toe of the right foot through the heel should extend back to the center of the arch on the back foot. Now imagine you were standing with your back against the wall. Try to keep both hips, both shoulder blades, glued to this imaginary wall as you begin to shift your hips to the left and tilt the pelvis, and slide the right hand down to the thigh. If you practice this pose a lot or you are very flexible, you might continue to take the hand down a little further to the shin, or for some of you, maybe even to the floor. Most people, though, have a tendency to collapse the lower rib cage in order to get further into the pose. So notice if you're doing that, and if you are, slide the hand back up a little higher and then focus on elongating through the right side of the rib cage, through both collarbones evenly. Roll the hips open, open the chest. press out through both feet to stabilize. Any position for the head is fine, whatever feels comfortable to you. Take a couple more breaths. Begin to root through the right foot and reach with the left hand as you transition back upright. And then rotating to the left. Turn the left foot out 90 degrees. Turn the right foot in slightly, then lift the right heel, take it a little wider, set it down. Draw your hips to the right, tilt the pelvis, and lengthen the left side of the rib cage as you begin to lean out and slide the left hand to the thigh, to the knee, to the shin, or the ankle or the floor. See if you can tell whether the left side of your rib cage is the same length as the right side, or whether it is compressed and shortened. And if it's shortened, walk your hand back up the leg slightly and then use that freedom to really lengthen through the lower side of the rib cage. Try and lift through both collarbones evenly. Spiraling the legs if you know how, pushing out through both feet to stabilize, and taking a few more breaths here. And coming back to center, turning your feet pigeon-toed, keeping your feet wide, and then release into a forward bend. You can support weight with your hands on your thighs, or you can hang into the stretch a little more deeply. Lean a little left, lean a little right. Take a few more breaths. Come back to center, step the feet together, and roll back up to standing. So do one more standing pose, but this time I'd like for you to choose a pose that you think will help round out your class for tonight, something that you feel will be of benefit to you. You could repeat triangle pose. You could work a little bit with one of the warrior poses, Virabhadrasana 1 or 2 or 3. If you want to work with balance, tree pose. If you want to do something more complex, dancer, half moon, revolved half moon. If you just want to work quads and back, chair pose. Choose a pose, and if it's an asymmetrical pose, we'll do 2 repetitions so you can switch sides. And if it's a pose like chair pose, work, rest, and then work a second time. So when you're ready, either repeating Trikonasana or coming into a pose of your own choosing. Come into a shallow expression. Take a breath, settle into the pose. Give your body a few moments to familiarize itself with the pose. And then decide whether or not to go a little further. 5 or 10 more breaths. Coming back to the breath, smooth, deliberate, fluid breathing. The more you can train your mind to focus with one pointed attention on your breath, the less stress you'll experience in your life. And to an amazing degree, the healthier you will begin to grow. Take a breath or two when you're ready. Coming up, pause, refocus, And either repeat what you just did, or if it was an asymmetrical pose, when you're ready, move into the second side. Once again, come in shallow. Take a moment to make friends with the pose, to reestablish the breath, to calm the mind, and then, if it feels right, begin to work your way a little deeper into the pose. Remember, it's always okay to stay at a shallower level for any reason at all. Don't feel obligated to push into the pose more deeply. 4 or 5 more breaths. Steady the mind, steady the breath, and steady the body. When you're ready, coming back to Tadasana, and then releasing into a forward bend. If your low back feels vulnerable, keep your hands on your thighs and carry most of the weight with your hands. If you prefer, you're welcome to hang into the stretch a little more deeply. Create more stretch not by reaching with the fingers or with the head. That causes SI joint issues over time. Instead, create the stretch by rotating the pelvis, lifting the tailbone. 2 or 3 breaths. And then, when you're ready, we'll be transitioning down to our hands and knees. And a couple more cat-cows. Just using the cat-cow pose to release tension, to calm and restore symmetry through the core. One more repetition of cobra, or if you prefer, locust, boat, or bow. Any of the favorite ways you might have of engaging the muscles in the back of your body. When you're ready, either repeating cobra or the pose of your choice, coming into the pose gently, feeling the pose, and then working a little harder. This will be our last workout for the back muscles. 3 or 4 breaths. When you're ready, one last downward facing dog, and this is also our last work for today's class, so if you have a lot of energy, double down with the downward facing dog. Fingers spread wide, middle finger pointing straight ahead. Reach the hips back, lift the tailbone up, reach the heels down. Root through the knuckle, the index fingers. And rotate the shoulders away from the ears, broadening the upper back. Lift the inner armpits and the shoulder blades float up, the chest drops through. Spiraling the legs if you know how. 2 or 3 more breaths. When you are ready, we'll be transitioning into pigeon pose, leading with the right knee. Bring the right knee forward and set the right knee on the floor between your wrists. And the foot should be out to the side slightly, not directly under you. Now begin to inch your left leg back and to the right slowly until you pick up a stretch. If you realize you already have a stretch or there's any discomfort, move the left leg to the left and forward to ease up. On the other hand, if you feel the muscles beginning to relax into the stretch and it feels good, slide the left leg back a little further, walk it a little further to the right, and lean into a deeper hip stretch. 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 more breaths. Lengthen the exhale. As you stretch the exhale, shape the exhale into a perfect sigh. And use that sigh to help calm and relax the muscles that you're working with. When you're ready, push back into downward facing dog, take a breath or two, and then bring your left knee forward for pigeon pose. Swing the foot out to the side slightly. Set the right knee on the floor behind you. If you need to ease up, move the right leg to the right and forward. If you need more stretch, slide the right leg back further and walk it to the left. Start with a gentle stretch. Take a few breaths and then decide what feels right to you for today's practice. Four or 5 more breaths, stretching the exhale. Softening the face, the neck, the shoulders. And then when you're ready, roll onto your back. And we'll close with a spinal twist, a short shavasana, and then a short seated meditation. Laying on your back, any variation of a reclining twist is fine. If you aren't sure, bring both knees to your chest, hug your knees, roll your whole body to your left until you lay on your left shoulder, and with your left hand grab the top knee and gently draw it to the left, away from you. Then, starting with the right shoulder, begin to rotate the right shoulder into a twisted position, and then the right arm is extended and floats. A lot of people will experience some discomfort with the shoulder, so experiment. Bend the elbow, straighten it, shift the arm a little higher overhead, out to the side, down a little bit. Put your hand on your forehead. Whatever you need to do. If you can't find a way to position that is absolutely pain-free, place your right hand on your chest and focus on rolling the right shoulder towards the floor. Focus on your breathing now. Breathe into the belly, the ribs, the chest, and the shoulders, and feel the right shoulder lift a little bit to accommodate that extra deep breath. And on the exhale, as you breathe out, rotate that shoulder a little further into the twist, or relax and let the weight of the arm do all the work for you. 4 or 5 more breaths. Take a breath or two to finish. And then switch sides. Start off laying on your back. Bring both knees into your chest. Hold your knees. Roll your whole body, including your shoulders and your hips. Roll all the way over onto your right side. Laying on your shoulder. With your right hand, grab the top knee and anchor that knee. Pull it down and away from you slightly to keep it fixed. Then begin rotating with the left shoulder blade, opening up into your twist, rolling the left shoulder blade towards the floor, and then find a position for the left arm. Shoulders can be very different from one side to the other, so you may have to explore to find what works on this side. If all else fails, rest your hand on your chest or any other position that is absolutely pain-free. Not just pain, but there's no discomfort. In the presence of discomfort, the body tenses, the mind tenses. It's impossible to relax, or at least very difficult. So, create a position that is comfortable and then focus on your breath. Breathe into the belly, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones. Feel that left shoulder lift a little as you breathe in. Sinking into the twist or rotating a little deeper on the exhalation. 3 or 4 more breaths on the second side. Then bring both knees to your chest, laying on your back, rock side to side, hugging the knees in, releasing any pressure and decompressing the low back. We'll be practicing a short Shavasana, about 5 minutes, and I'll bring you back up for a short meditation. If you prefer to stay in Shavasana during the meditation, though, that is absolutely fine. If you need anything, support for your knees, do whatever you need to be more comfortable. If you are comfortable, extend the legs evenly and imagine a basketball between your ankles, or perhaps a little wider. If your low back feels vulnerable, keep the knees bent. Draw the shoulder blades together and down, open the chest, lengthen the back of the neck away from the shoulders, so the shoulder blades and the head move away from each other. Stretch your face lengthwise. Open the mouth, pull the lips into a small O, move the teeth apart until you feel the cheeks stretch. Lift the eyebrows, roll the eyes up, stretch the face lengthwise. Take a breath and release. And then bringing your attention back to the breath. As we lay on our back, the rib cage is partially immobilized by the pressure of the floor, which makes it more conducive for practicing abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. So, allow the chest to become increasingly less mobile, more still, and redirect your attention down into the abdomen, into the belly. Feel the abdomen expanding, lifting and expanding as you breathe in, relaxing back down on the exhale. And let the chest become still. Slowing down the breath slightly has a calming effect. Too much and it creates stress. Find that balance point where you slow the breath down just the right amount that you feel the mind and the body becoming more relaxed, more calm, more centered. As you breathe, begin relaxing the face, forehead, eyebrows, eyelids, eyeballs, jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders. Feet, ankles, calves, knees, and thighs. loosening hip sockets, relaxing the buttocks. Take a deeper breath. Let the arms and the legs fall away with a sigh. And bring your attention back to the breathing. As you relax the belly and the ribs and the chest and the shoulders. The back of the neck, and soften the throat. The jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. And especially the eyes and the eyeballs. Letting the eyeballs melt into the back of your head. The eyelids, the eyebrows, the forehead. The temples, soft and hollow. The scalp and the crown. Begin to breathe a little deeper, allowing the ribs and the chest to join at the very end of the inhalation. Spread the fingers, the toes, slowly stretching. Those of you that would like to continue in a seated position, roll to one side and push up to a comfortable seated position, taking time to set up, drawing the flesh out from the sit bones, rotating the pelvis, adjusting in any way you need to be comfortable. We'll sit for about 5 minutes, and those of you that prefer to continue laying down, relax back into Shavasana or any favorite form of meditation. If you aren't sure how to meditate or don't have a favorite way of meditating, focusing on your breath. Breath awareness is one of the oldest, most sacred forms of meditation and one of the simplest. Begin to breathe a little deeper. And take a moment to notice how you feel, the quality of your consciousness, the senses, your breath. Those of you that are laying down, take a moment to stretch, arching, twisting, breathing. And then rolling to one side, pushing up to a comfortable seated position. I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening, and I hope you can join us again next month. And as long as the crisis is lasting and we're in lockdown, I'll continue to live stream a full moon yoga class once a month. But I'll also have this available on my Facebook page and also on my website, so that if you want to come down between full moons and do a little bit of yoga, you can reuse this. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening. And if you have a chance and you haven't already, be sure and step outside and take a look at our moon as it comes up. Namaste.